There's a specific kind of honesty in a Peter Lindbergh photograph. It's something you feel before you even really look at the composition. In an industry that usually spends hours trying to hide imperfections, Lindbergh did the opposite, where he actually looked for them. He wanted the stray hair, the tired eyes, the laugh lines. In today's video, we're looking at the man who was fundamental to the 90s aesthetic by stripping everything away. We're diving into the stunning work of Peter Lindbergh. At a time where fashion was quite loud and it was all about the big hair and the heavy shoulders, Lindbergh took a group of relatively unknown models to a beach in Santa Monica. He put them in simple white shirts, no elaborate styling, no heavy makeup, just women being themselves in the daylight. And this simple, unposed look was initially rejected by American Vogue, but later embraced by Anna Wintour as a turning point for the magazine, embracing the new standard of modern beauty. But in the cultural sense within the fashion industry, a new era truly arrived when the January 1990 issue of British Vogue hit the stands. The cover featured Naomi, Linda, Tatjana, Christy, and Cindy, and Lindbergh himself called this cover image the birth certificate of the supermodels. It's probably one of the most famous fashion images ever captured, but what makes it work isn't just the faces, it's the whole atmosphere. Lindbergh didn't want them modelling or in a studio portrait. He wanted them in the streets of downtown New York wearing simple tops and, as Christy Turlington remembered, even wearing her own Levi jeans. That single image didn't just sell a magazine, it created a phenomenon. It was the birth of the supermodel as we know it. Then there was the Wild at Heart editorial for Vogue in 1991, the models in biker jackets and peaked caps, leaning against motorcycles. This wasn't about the soft, laughing intimacy of his earlier beach shots. This was Lindbergh leaning into a cinematic narrative, referencing Marlon Brando in The Wild One, but he was giving that rugged, rebellious energy to women. There's a specific power in these shots. The heavy leather contrasted against the beautiful faces of the models. It was a move away from the traditional, polished glamour of the era, focusing instead on a kind of toughness that felt entirely new for a fashion magazine. We are so fortunate that we get to truly understand his process in the documentary he filmed in 1991, simply titled Models, the Film. The documentary serves as an intimate and unpolished portrait of the era's most iconic faces. It moved beyond the static pages of magazines to capture the personalities, voices, and behind-the-scenes realities of the women who defined the supermodel phenomenon. Lindbergh takes the camera behind the scenes in a beautiful, slow, observational way and chronicles 5 of Lindbergh's primary muses: Naomi Campbell, Linda Evangelista, Cindy Crawford, Tatjana Petites, and Stephanie Seymour. You hear them talking about their lives, their anxieties, and their work. By putting a motion camera in front of them, Lindbergh proved his point, that beauty is most compelling when it's moving, breathing, and most importantly, a little flawed. Peter Lindbergh holds a unique place in the history of the Pirelli calendar, being the only photographer to have been commissioned to shoot it 3 times in 1996, 2002, and 2017. His work for the calendar is credited with shifting the publication from a pin-up style toward a more sophisticated, emotional form of art. In the 2002 calendar, which he shot on the backlots of Paramount Studios, he moved away from traditional models and started casting actresses, like Brittany Murphy, Selma Blair, and Monet Mazur. He wasn't interested in the bombshell, instead he was interested in the character. But it was his 2017 calendar that really left a mark on the industry. He called it emotional. He brought together 14 of the world's most iconic actresses, including women like Uma Thurman, Helen Mirren, and Julianne Moore. And he did something that was almost unheard of at that level. He refused to retouch the images. No digital smoothing, no perfecting the skin, and no hiding the age. He said that his goal was to free women from the terror of youth and perfection. When you look at those photos, you aren't looking at celebrities in the marketing sense. You're looking at women who are allowed to be vulnerable, tired, and remarkably powerful and absolutely beautiful all at once. Lindbergh predominantly shot on black and white film, believing it captured a deeper truth than colour. He avoided the cold sharpness of digital, later using Photoshop only to emulate his signature grainy filmic texture. He embraced distance and compression in his work, frequently using a 70 to 200mm telephoto lens. This allowed him to stay physically distant, giving subjects space to breathe while creating a compressed, cinematic look that made them appear grounded and powerful. He preferred natural soft light, often using large diffusers and blackout drapes. By stripping out the secondary reflections and the harsh bounce from the ground, he created a very specific kind of soft, subtractive shadow. It's what gives his skin tones that signature silvery look. In the studio, he used continuous HMI and tungsten lighting rather than flashes to maintain a cinematic, painterly atmosphere. There was also his refusal to retouch. Even as the industry moved into the digital age, Peter's process stayed rooted in the darkroom philosophy. He used grain as a texture, not a flaw. He famously said that Photoshop was the death of the person. To him, every wrinkle, every freckle, and every imperfection was a part of the story. If you took those away, you weren't just cleaning up an image, you were erasing the human being in front of the lens. And interestingly, Lindbergh found laughing models banal and boring. He preferred melancholy and thoughtful expressions, believing they revealed the manifold, beautiful layers of a human face. His work is incredible on a screen, but it's a completely different experience in print. Peter put together some beautiful collections over the years. Books like Peter Lindbergh on fashion photography, or his Images of Women. When you see these images on paper, you really get a sense of the texture and the scale that just doesn't translate digitally. And these aren't just coffee table books, they're archives. In print, his high contrast black and white work takes on a physical, almost tactile quality that you just don't get on a phone or a monitor. They're a beautiful way to see the sheer scale of his career, and I've linked a few of my favourite collections in the description below if you'd like to see his work up close. Sadly, in September 2019, Peter Lindbergh passed away in Paris at the age of 74. The devastating news sent a shockwave through the industry, but the tributes that followed weren't just about his talent, they were about his kindness. He was known to be warm, grounded, and deeply protective. From Cindy Crawford to Linda Evangelista, the women who stood in front of his lens didn't just lose a photographer, they lost a dear friend and a protector. He was one of the few people in the industry who didn't want to change them. He only wanted to see them. Before he died, Peter spent 2 years curating his final project, an exhibition titled Untold Stories. It was the first time he had ever taken total control of how his work was displayed. It wasn't organised by date or by fame, it was organised by feeling. It was his manifesto, a final reminder that fashion photography doesn't actually have to be about the clothes. For Peter, the fashion was always secondary to the human being wearing it. Today, his legacy is managed by his sons through the Peter Lindbergh Foundation, but his true legacy isn't in a foundation or even in the archives. It's in the shift he caused in our collective eye. He taught us that a portrait is a two-way street, a silent conversation between the photographer and the subject based entirely on trust. Peter Lindbergh didn't just take pictures, he gave us a new way to look at ourselves. And in a world that is more filtered than ever, his unretouched, grainy, silver screen truth feels more essential today than it ever has. I hope you found this look into Peter's work as interesting and as beautiful as I did.